been a great day, and I'm sure you just make it much, much more better. So I like to be welcome you in this our conversation. Thank you for coming here.
Well, thank you, Ishvan, for inviting me and for the amazing work you're doing in the world. I have been watching you grow your gifts in sharing what it is to live regeneratively and what it is to help people to understand regenerative design. And I just am thankful that you are helping to spearhead the permaculture movement or the regenerative design movement in Hungary and other places around the world. I was really thankful last year to get time to go with you and be with you in Ethiopia and to do some work there and to have the experience to actually see how well you work on the ground. So I want to thank you and just all those people that are listening and joining us today. You know, I wanted to talk a little bit about applied permaculture at scale and specifically looking at the integration of permaculture design and agroecology and regenerative thinking in the context of humanitarian development. And thinking of how it is that the permaculture movement can support other movements that are already out there. One of the things that's happened in my 25-year career since I first did my trainings with Bill Mollison in Australia was that I realized that permaculture itself is not the end all. It's not. It's almost like you could go through a permaculture course and then at the end of the course is lose the word permaculture, but to let the understandings of what that design science is about to integrate into who you are and what you're doing, and then to bring it in, and I like to say like a coyote. So bring it in like a coyote into the work you're doing. And one of the things that's happened in my life is I had the opportunity to go to different places in the world where very marginalized people have been very marginalized, have had difficulty maintaining food security and maintaining ecological stability to basically keep all that sustains them in a regenerative way. And that led me to understand that there's leverage points in the world. There are leverage places that people are already doing a lot of good work. And when you come in saying permaculture is the only answer, there's this, you shut down a lot of possibility. Rather than going in and saying, hey, you know, here's a design framework that we can apply to what you're doing in your language. And so I wanted to start off like that because I think a lot of permaculturists miss opportunities to grow the movement by being, you know, by saying that permaculture is the only way. And I again, to me, that's a monoism. That's like saying a monocrop, you know, you can do everything you can in a monocrop, or there's only one way is not a healthy way of thinking, I believe. So when the opportunity came for the work for me to do internationally, I was asked to go and share some of the permaculture work that I had been doing in Liberia right when the war ended in 2005. And work with former child soldiers to do a vocational training with them on how they could use permaculture in a variety of different ways. So to rebuild their country. And so that got me on this path of regular work in international settings, which then led to us beginning at Quail Springs to do a international development focused PDC. So a permaculture design course focused on international development and humanitarian context. And it led to meeting different people like Tom Cole, who has been working around the world, but mostly in Eastern Africa, promoting and developing the permagarden framework. It led me to meeting Natalie Topa, who is also here on this call, who did a presentation earlier, who is a superstar in in the work that she's doing in developing the different scales of resilience design and permaculture, agroecology, regenerative thinking in a large agency working in unstable system, in unstable environments, in places where there's the most vulnerable people in the world. And so those partnerships have developed out of that. And a lot of the slides I want to show you today are actually ones that are a lot of the work with Natalie Topa, a lot of the work that is developed to leverage the huge humanitarian development behemoth, the industry that's out there that's already working with millions and millions of people. And so we started to develop a different languaging of permaculture and agroecology to fit within the vernacular of the humanitarian context. And so I want to jump into that. And I was really fortunate to be invited to be a part of a team about 7 years ago. It was a USAID funded project. And go ahead and Ishvan, if you could go to the next slide for me. And what that the TOPS basically is a technical operations performance support unit. Did that slide change? Can you hear me on that? There it is, perfect. So we developed basically a series of trainings and support manuals that use the language of the industry around development and around humanitarian response. And we started to develop both the household level food security and the farm levels food security based on permaculture and agroecology principles. And so over these years, we've worked in everywhere from Malawi to Niger, and these programs have gone to Bangladesh and to Nepal, and all through testing in Zimbabwe, and developing this 2-week training program and support program that we now call resilience design. So here in this slide, you can see a couple of the manuals that were developed. All of it is open source, and you can find it on the Food Security Network. The permagarden has been said by USAID to be one of their top systems or strategies for approaching food security, and it's getting a lot of traction. And you couple that with basically this whole movement within the humanitarian development context around resilience. And go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Sorry, we have a little bit of I'm out in the country right now on our farm, and we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty because I can't run my own presentation. I don't have enough bandwidth. So you've got farm level bandwidth here. But basically, we started to look at how resilience grows. And what is resilience but from a soil and water perspective? And a lot of the programs that are out there, we're looking at resilience as markets and economics, but not looking at the overall context of the health of an ecology. So one of the things that we started to introduce into the systems of these big organizations was this idea that resilience originates with healthy soil biome and a healthy hydrological system in a watershed. And so approaching resilience from that level of detail and about building relationships through design that are beneficial in that system. And so we started to introduce that idea. And then go to the next slide, please. And we started to look at how that looks at different scales based on the different sectors or the different programmatic focuses within these organizations. And again, we're not saying permaculture here, but this is, you know, if I whisper, it's permaculture design embedded in what we call resilience design. It's using all the methodologies at each one of these scales. And so here we have the household scale, we have the farm and livestock level scale, the community level, and the watershed level. And that really can go, you know, to bioregional to global. We're focusing here through watershed. So looking at the watershed as a lifeboat. So go ahead and click to the next slide. So first scale is household food production. And I love what Bill Mollison has said. I remember back in my permaculture course in Australia, he said, you know, he believes all the problems of the world can be solved in the garden. And I've tried to wrap my head and heart around that, and I've really come to see that so many problems could be minimized by gardening. And I feel like, you know, maybe not all the problems, like it's hard to reverse colonization and you know, dominating you know, domination of different peoples and the kind of social justice issues, I think are going to take more than a garden. But I feel like a lot of the issues that people are facing or awakening to during COVID, they're able to actually see how much of their world changes when they do have a garden that's right there at their household. And one of the things that does is it allows us to develop bio-intensive systems that use waste, that cycle waste in our household compounds. It also is a place for us to use wastewater, but it gives us a really good relationship and a healthy relationship with our nutrition, and can also offer an economic boon to someone who has very little money coming in except once a year when they get their annuals harvested, a home garden or a permagarden. And I love that word permagarden because that's where we've kept some of the permaculture. We call it permagardens. And that's something that can also help to stabilize someone's income by selling weekly greens, as well as making sure you have high quality nutrition. The next scale, which is the next slide, is farm and livestock. And so really looking at the next layer of food security. And I'm going to basically go through a little bit more about how we train this in a few minutes here, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the different types of scales. So this is really a place where we're looking at how to stabilize our food systems in a way that where we're working with rainwater harvesting, we're boosting the microbiology, we're doing three-dimensional growing, and Natalie Topol will recognize this particular set of these two pictures, which these are in a place called Kabondo, Tanzania, with a woman named Denisa. And you can see during the course that we did, you can see this system on the upper slide that shows what used to be her old farm, which was not overly productive and was basically a maize farm. They would basically grow corn, and she would grow corn, and it wasn't very healthy. There was a lot of erosion. And so what we did is the standard protocol of slow spread, sink all of the water and nutrition or nutrients on that landscape into various systems of high production. And then we grow three-dimensionally. So you can see some of the trellising that's there. You can see the net and pan systems of demi-lunes or smile berms with tree protectors. We're integrating not just annuals into the system, which is what most people have been acculturated to by the Western world, is that you grow only only, and you sell them, and then you buy everything. So you get into an economic system rather than just providing for your needs and creating perennial systems of supporting yourself. And so there's a lot of tree integration and really an opportunity for Denisa, the woman that's there, to actually have year-round production. And then we integrate our livestock into these systems, whether it's small livestock of chicken systems or larger cattle systems. We set it up so that they can integrate into it. So I really, I'll share a little bit more about how we train this, but I really love this photo because you see then what it looks like after with Denisa. And so she was pregnant with that baby. She was pregnant with that baby when we were doing the course. And then this is months later where you can actually see, you can see her holding the baby in the fully productive farm. And you can see behind her is the, oh, there goes a goose right over my head here. I don't know if you can hear that. Huh. You can see the trellising is completely enveloped. So our trellises over our water harvesting systems are completely enveloped with multiple types of foods, including, you know, these are some pumpkins, but also there's perennial beans. There's all sorts of different things growing on that. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So the next slide is what we call the community scale. And here is a couple of pictures. One is from an amazing program that Natalie Topa and I did together with the Danish Refugee Council earlier this year, just before all the countries were shut down. I think we got home around February 11th from Northwest Uganda in a place called Nebi, and with a program that they're doing to actually integrate resilience design, permaculture, and agroecology into infrastructure development. And I really have to give it to Natalie here, really give kudos to Natalie here, that of taking permaculture to a scale that is not been, I have seen very little people doing that type of scale other than going to one farm, doing a large scale farm, doing this scale farm. But this is looking at, you know, hundreds of kilometers of development, and where the water from the roads are getting pulled off and taken out and utilized. And it's a place where they're, you know, restoring large landscapes, but using the infrastructure of roads as a resource rather than it being a problem going into the community causing flooding, which oftentimes it does. So the community scale is also about collective design and collective implementation. And this picture I'm showing here on top is from a project, I think this is actually Congo, a project in the Congo that we did in Lake Kivu area. Again, doing collective or what we call shared hydrological strategies, so where there's no boundaries, no borders. And I think that's an important thing to look at because, you know, a watershed, it doesn't look at where a property boundary ends and where it begins. So the strategy to approach basically to have a healthy hydrology means you have to lose our cadastral data, our property lines that people have created to find the best strategies and structures that work for that landscape, and then working to restore the treescape. It's one of the things that I hate to hear from people, especially permaculturists, saying, you know, look at what climate change is doing. You know, there's all this flood and drought. This is climate changes, and I don't think that's actually the case. It's actually mostly land degradation that has caused flood and droughts. Yes, we have long-term trends. We have, you know, changes in when rain falls, but we've disabled the systems, the buffering systems in the landscape to actually be able to help us through those in a real sensible way, and in a way that buffers our food security and also the ecological services that support us to actually even have an economy. And so I think it's really important to remember that land degradation is one of the biggest things you can turn that problem into a solution. So like you'll hear, or if you haven't already heard Natalie talk about her Burundi project, that's really taking the problem of land degradation and, here's erosion, let's turn this flooding into food, and let's turn it around into something that is stable, and that's reversing the land degradation. And as permaculturists, that's what I think is at the core of our work right now. We are about going into damaged landscapes and doing healing processes with people in a culturally appropriate way for wherever you can support, and then to learn from one another. That's the other thing I find a lot of permaculturists do, is they go in to, they get asked to go somewhere, or they feel like they have to go somewhere to do this work, and they come in with a God complex. They come in saying, I'm gonna be your savior. And I don't believe we're in a time of that. I don't think that's possible. I think that as a permaculturist, you should be there to learn from the people you're working with. You should be exchanging ideas, because you go into a refugee camp in northern Uganda, and you're going to find that the people there have so many skills to share with you that you just do not have. And so you find the places you can support each other. And I think it's really important to be in humility. And to be humble, and realizing the root words of humility is also humus. So this idea of, the soil itself, things can grow from humility. But when you come in with a big ego, like you're going to save the world, things have a hard time growing from that, because it's not in its most humble place. It also is the root of the word humor, which I think is really interesting. So being able to be humorous in this too means that you have good perception of the environment around you, and you go in with that perception, and so you're able to learn and grow and see the patterns of what's happening in that landscape. Next slide, please. Am I coming through okay still? I just want to do a check. I just kind of am off and running.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good from here.
Okay, great. Great.
Well,
when I talked about community, basically community scale work, this picture is from that course I was mentioning, the infrastructure course with Nuri and the Danish Refugee Council, where we were taking runoff from the road that we were helping to develop, or it was already there, but we were helping to make it more functional. We then, rather than having the road flood, we were taking that water off and putting it out into farms. And so that was some of the work that we were doing. So again, protecting the infrastructure, so lowering its cost of maintenance, but also doing, turning that flooding into food, and enhancing the hydrology and the nutrient capture of the farms of which the road passes through. The next slide, which is the watershed scale. And I think this is a really interesting kind of place to think of. And as you know, in permaculture, we look at the bigger scale before we look at the finite and the more detailed look at things. And I think, I'm going from the most detailed to the big scale, but in design, we would actually start at looking at the overall watershed and then work down to the detail of the home. And so here it's about using regenerative infrastructure. It's about forging partnerships with people who are in that larger watershed, regardless of their politics, regardless of their political, not just their politics, but their cultural, maybe it's tribal, differentiations. I find that a lot of the work in doing resilience design in communities where there are existing tribes, there's so much navigation, and I know Natalie could talk about that as well, as having a sensitivity to that, understanding, like if you do a permagarden in one tribe's household for one tribe and you're in a refugee camp, then you need to also make sure the other tribes are represented with the same level and quality of teaching. And we've had that happen when we were working with Natalie up in northern Kenya. So we had to be very, very specific for that. And then also like with the host communities of those areas, that they are not left out. So there's looking at not just the landscape, but the people scape and the social scape and the cultural scape of that place. And then really, how does that come together to reforest that landscape, or where you're unable to reforest, like in the middle of a city and a market? How do you mimic the functions of a forest in that place? And then looking at how to recharge spring lines and boreholes. One of the things that drives both Natalie and I really crazy is you have all these agencies going out and drilling boreholes, or in America we call them wells, and they have no plan for recharge. So people are taking out the tree systems, they're messing with the hydrology that recharges those boreholes. And in one place, I was in Zimbabwe, they had over 900 wells or boreholes, and 700 of them had dried up. And I think it's really important that if you drill a borehole, or if you have a borehole, that there's a borehole recharge plan that's nested within the larger watershed. And go to the next slide if you could. And that's rainwater harvesting at scale. And these are a few pictures from work that's been done with Danish Refugee Council. Hey, Natalie, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Warren. I'm listening and watching the presentation.
Are you on, Natalie?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Do you have any other? Yeah, I can hear you beautifully. Do you want to add in anything there? I'm kind of ending this part of just talking about the different scales, and just wanted to see if you had anything you wanted to share in that might have come up with you as I was sharing.
Yeah, thanks. Well, first, thanks, Warren, for highlighting the work that we're doing, because I do really think that we're pushing the envelope. I think we're pushing the edge. And with the scales and the approach. I think for me, the biggest challenge in the work that we do is that knowledge is the main input. It's not like we can just distribute packages of knowledge, like in a food distribution. So it's really the nuance of, as you said, moving in stride with the community. They have to arrive to the conclusions by themselves of what are the challenges in that place. I think before the call we were talking about, the sort of God complex. You and I, when we arrive to a community, we're not like, all right, the experts are here, the consultants are here. I think that we do try to make people feel that they are the experts in that place. You and I have never been to Kibondo before, or Adjumani, and they know what that place is about. They have the experiential capital. They have all these things, and so really respecting that through our process is the only way that I think that the sense of ownership is going to make the communities that we are serving to make them feel like this is really something that we own and we're going to carry it forward. Because you and I do a 2-week training and then we leave. If we don't do it right, it doesn't move forward. And so it's really about empowering and emboldening people and trusting, showing them that, kind of demonstrating that we very much trust and respect their knowledge and their experiential capital.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Nat. And she really hit on the nature of this training is all about participatory methods that we use, and also being, I'll throw back that piece of being humble and really going in, which means that you're a good listener. And so much of what we do is listening. And I'm going to have Ishvan, if you could go to slide 27, and it says resilience design on there, and I'm going to walk through our training process. That was the perfect slide, Natalie. Thank you. See if they can get over to slide 27. Bob, 27. That's a nice slide of a permagarden, but that's not it. again, and we were in a crazy place there. That's 5 weeks of growth, I believe. But please go to slide 27, please. Keep going through. It says resilient design.
Warren,
yeah,
we can see
there you
yeah.
go. Thank you. I couldn't hear you there, Nat. Could you say that again?
Yeah, I was just saying that we can see the first slide, the title slide for the next section. It's visible to us.
Okay, the resilience design. Okay, great. Thank you. Good, good, good. I couldn't. That's why. All right. So a little bit of this. This is from in Adjumani, Uganda, and again with Natalie. And you know, and I need to give a shout out as well to the Danish Refugee Council, because I'm really feeling like, of all the agencies that I work with, they have and due to Natalie's incredible force of energy that she has and carries into this, and but they as an agency have done so much to integrate this at different levels, and they're I think by far doing the most with resilience design or permaculture agroecology than most agencies I've seen. And so I'm really pleased, and also I only want to give energy of my life energy, our precious life energy should go to things that are truly leverage points. I think we're in a time in history where we need to make sure that our life energy leverages for more healing on the earth. And so I feel with Danish Refugee Council that can really happen. So, you know, Natalie said we show up at a community. We usually, like with Danish Refugee Council or other agencies that I work with, they've already have developed long-term relationships with people in those communities. So it's already been established. They know we're coming. We go out there, do some site visits. We meet the people. We get permission to be there. I always ask permission to come in. I don't want to just assume that I can just go where I want to. I'm coming to their community, and if you don't want me there, I don't want to be there. So that's a really important distinction, is to go only to the places where you're invited. So we meet the invitation there. We go to the people, we talk to the elders, we talk to the people who are the movers and shakers in that community. That's an important thing that we do right off the bat, is we see who are the people who are the innovators, who have a lot of social capital. And we start to look at how, you know, what are the resources in the community? And then we work with the staff, government, all of these people who are working in these camps. We go back to the classroom, and that's the next slide, if you can turn it. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to train the people already working in those communities to approach the work, this idea of holistic systems thinking, and applying it into their work, whether they're working with, you know, wash systems, which are, you know, waste and sanitation systems, or they're doing natural resource management, or they're doing nutrition, or they're doing ag, or they're working in protection, or whatever their role is, or they're government engineers, or whatever
shelters,
it might
shelters
be,
also.
that how can they bring whole, or shelter, yeah, how to bring the this whole systems thinking and this design methodology to that work. And so we're not, you know, it's like we're training the communities, but we're doing it as a way of mentoring the people that are already there, working in those communities to continue that work. So we begin this in the classroom. And here you can see Natalie is teaching. We co-teach this. It's basically, you know, usually we're 2 days in the classroom going through theory, you know, talking about what the process is. Go to the next slide, please. And you know, we're you know, it's all the spread, you know, all the diagrams. You know, probably most of you have been in permaculture courses before, and so you've seen these types of diagrams, and we just go through all of this, and often it's introducing these concepts to everybody in that classroom, all the staff and government people for the first time, to this idea of holistic thinking, or, you know, I'll whisper it, it's permaculture, but we call it resilience design or regenerative design. Again, don't get lost in the labels. Call it whatever you need to call it to get the most traction for it to work in the context that you're working. Whatever you want to call it. I just feel like it's important that we don't get stuck on permaculture. So then the next slide, please. So as part of that classroom, there's also afternoon practicums where we're teaching them how to make an A-frame, how to use an A-frame, how to calibrate an A-frame, how to use it in the field, and then how to teach it. Because the whole idea is that these people who are taking this class with us are going to then be the teachers in the community. Next slide, please. And so we basically are teaching people how to measure twice and dig once. That's one of the mottos we use in doing field work is, you know, always survey twice and dig once. I've had big projects I've worked with in the Congo who, you know, they would have a poorly calibrated A-frame, and they would do 3 kilometers of contour earthworks, and, you know, a lot of it would be off because they didn't measure it twice and they didn't calibrate correctly. So we teach these things that they'll be teaching. Next slide, please. Then what we do is we teach them about, and we facilitate the idea of gathering and identifying local resources. And I'll show you how we do this in the field in a minute here. And we look at what is at hand. And that's one of the things I love about permaculture, and I love about this idea of resilience design, is that it's all local resources. You don't need to get into some kind of supply chain that's bringing chemicals and fertilizers from far off places to come in and kill your soil biome and actually cause destruction and put you into debt. You don't need to do that. And we know that as permaculturists. The land we're theirs. Never been to Adjumani, or very little. We've been to that area very little. And, you know, when we go in there, it's not for us to identify resources. Sometimes some real questions like, wow, would you call this a resource or would you not? You know, looking at some charcoal. So some people see charcoal dust as a waste. Well, we see it as a resource. So then we go to the next slide, please. We start to talk about design, and we look at whole systems. And we then, and I love this about Danish refugees, they first build a garden in their compound, their office compound in that area, so that every time someone walks into their compound, they're actually seeing an example of it. And Natalie, I want to ask you, I actually believe that I bet people during COVID who work for Danish Refugee Council in Adjumani are actually eating from that garden right now. Is that true?
Yeah, actually, they're that's our DRC office compound, which, by the way, was suffering from huge amounts of flooding. Remember, Warren? And our team had hired engineers and stuff to try to address the flooding of the conference room. And we're like, well,
that's right.
You know, we're just gonna, you know, we just are gonna make a garden and solve that problem. So, yes, people are harvesting. I know that Alison is there this weekend, and they're doing more planting and stuff. But I do know that in Yemen, in our teams in Yemen who have perma gardens, I don't know if it was Somalia or Yemen. In one of those places, for Ramadan, they made the point that right now, even during Ramadan, people are not having to go out and buy extra food, and that was really touching. So yeah, that was good news. So yes, here now in Ramadan, this is definitely supplementing people's holidays, their celebrations, and adding, you know, good nutritional diversity as well.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and it's such a great place to start, is you start at the place that's close to, you know, if you're working with an agency, it's right at the core or the center of that agency. And so then every time they go out into the field, they walk through a permagarden. So we, you know, one of the things that I do is I look for a place that people are like, nothing will grow here. And if you look at this slide, this is at their compound there, the Danish Refugee Council compound. You can see there's erosion in the middle of it, going right through. And Natalie talked about the flooding there that they had engineers work on and weren't able to solve. And when we put this system in, it did solve that flooding issue. And so here is an area that's heavily compacted. It's a really prime site because it is so poor. Often I'll see agencies will try to find the best land to do a demonstration rather than the worst. And what I find is that you get more traction with people wanting to do this if they see it in the most damaged landscape. So here we have a very damaged landscape. Go to the next slide, please. And we first start by walking the water of that landscape. And that's a term that Brad Lancaster coined with us in helping us develop. Brad Lancaster wrote the books Rainwater Harvesting for Dry Lands, that series of 3 books. And he coined that term, walking the water, which I love to do, which is starting at the top of the watershed and then walk down. And then you look at the site you're working with and you look at what interventions would do best. So here we're starting to protect that area with a bioswale system. Go to the next slide, please. And you can see it getting more developed. So, you know, they're learning this by doing. And that's the other thing that I find a lot of people who are doing online classes that after, you know, which is great. I think online learning is wonderful, but it's really important to then go and mentor with somebody or to do practicum portion of a course with people who can show you the ins and outs of how things look on the ground in varied contexts. Next slide, please. I'm just going to go through this next one, still doing bioswales. The next one again. So here we're slowing, spreading, infiltrating, and protecting the rainwater coming into the system. Next slide, please. And then we gather all the local resources and we start to see what we have, and we start to build a diverse set of fertility inputs. One of the things that's really important is diversity of inputs, so that the soil biology has multiple resources to be able to grow the biome to be very healthy. So there you can see some pictures of that. And then we're digging, the double digging. This is one of the team leaders there who, it's great because when you get a team leader actually out digging, then the rest of the team is obligated to dig as well. And here we're doing a double dug bed, and there's a lot written about this type of system. It's what we use in the permagarden. It is a deep soil preparation. It's how I do my garden at home as well. And so you're literally preparing it to 60 centimeters or 2 feet deep so that there's deep root expression, and you're bearing in the bottom 30 centimeters, the 30 to 60 centimeter profile, you're bearing multiple amendments, multiple soil fertility. And then you're putting the topsoil back on and then amending that as well with good compost or dry manures, and creating a really high germination rate by prepping this well, and then good growth so you can actually put a lot of food in it, more food than you could in a normal garden because the roots can express so deeply, so you can biointensively plant that. Next slide, please. Here, roof water was causing, Natalie will remember this roof water was going into this area, and it was just covered in moss and like lichen here, and nothing was growing there. And so we turned that into a giant water storage tank in the soil itself, doing double digging. And it's pretty crazy, some of the photos you'll see going on. Go ahead and hit the next slide, please. And you can see the double digging and then putting the amendment in the bottom layer. And basically we do a minimum of 5 different types of foods or supplements, or not supplements, but nutrient inputs to amend that soil. And then the next slide, please. And then what's that, Nat?
I think you're thinking of the word amendments, soil amendments.
Oh, I can't hear you. I'm sorry. It cut out.
No worries, no problem.
But then, so seed spacing, you'll see here. We can do it again very intensively. Let's go to the next slide. So now you see that same area that was with the next slide there. It says harvest and bank water. You can start to see the system coming together with a bioswale where we're putting trellising up there. We have double dug beds. And you can see that was the area that before was just hard pan with an erosion gully in it. Next slide, please. You can see even there's that same view that we looked at before. And, you know, another reason it's really important to do this before you go into a community is so you're experienced with it. You don't want to go into a community and doing it for the first time and learning on your own. That's something that I really feel it's important. You don't just leave a permaculture class and then say you're going to go out and save the world. What I say is, you know, go back home and do some gardening, do some farming, and until you can do it with your own experience, don't go out and take it out into the world until you've gained some experience. Make mistakes where you have to live with the repercussions of those mistakes rather than someone else who maybe is putting all of their nutritional stake in what they're doing here. So it's really important to understand what you're doing before you go into a community. So right now, all the staff are basically getting to work with this before we go into the community, and we get to mentor them in the community. Next slide, please. These are just a few photos here. And then next slide again. And you'll see we get to this place of ideal germination conditions. So within 3 days, we had germination, and we could see seed growth there. So now, 3 days later, we're working in the community, but every day we're coming back through the compound and we're seeing the garden grow. Next slide, please. And then we do some post-planting and training support. Next slide. We also were doing gray water systems. And in the interest of time, I'm going to have you jump over to slide 58, which says demonstration, demonstration, demonstration at a Lara settlement camp. So if you could jump over to that slide. So now we've done the training with the classroom portion of theory. We've now gone out into the compound of the office, and we've done a demonstration of what that looked like. And now we go to the community. And here is a settlement camp. It's a different type of refugee. They call it a refugee settlement camp, mostly South Sudanese people who are from different tribes, often who are warring with one another. Natalie knows a lot about the conditions in South Sudan because she's lived there for and worked there and programmed there for many years. And here we had the opportunity to then take all of those people who were in the course out to this place. So next slide, please. So here we start this process we call the story of place. And this is where we're really wanting to hear what was this place like? What was their lives like before they were refugees? What was it like from the host community standpoint? Like, what did this look like? What is their vision for, you know, what's happening now? And then what's their vision for the future? So they're basically sharing their story. We're not coming in saying, hey, we're going to do all this stuff. We're coming in saying, what's your story? What's working? What's not? What are the opportunities? What are the constraints? Nat, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I echoed much of this on my presentation earlier. But I think it's important to say, you know, this is a training of trainers.
Are you all with me?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me, Warren?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, this is a training of trainers because we want our teams and even the community members to be able to help to spread the techniques and all these different strategies. And when in the training, we keep building on, you know, the training keeps building on itself. We start within the compound, you know, we're looking at soil and water harvesting, then we go out to the permagarden, then we go out to the farm or the landscape level. And so it's at every step of the way, it's reinforcing the same principles of, well, gravity. So, you know, just keep capturing and harnessing everything that's flowing downhill, get it into production, stabilize with perennials and all of that stuff. So yeah.
And so here, slide please. Thank you, Natalie. It's cut out on my end, Natalie, so I hope I didn't cut you off.
No.
So the next slide, where we then start to tap into their local expertise. And how we do that is we have them take our teams of people that are a part of the class, the trainers, who then are being trained by the local people about what are the local resources. So we do a gathering of local resources. We walk the land, then they bring it back and teach us what those resources are, how they're used. Next slide, please. And we put them all in the middle, and each person in the community, we have a man go and then or a female go, and then a man and then a female, and we go back and forth where they share their local expertise. And sometimes we do this for an hour or two where they're just sharing, and many communities have given us feedback that this is the first time an NGO, a non-government organization, has come in and actually asked them what they know. And I think that's actually a really sad state, is when you have people going into a community saying, we have all the answers you need, you're nothing. That's basically when you don't ask and you're not truly interested in what they know, then it's like it really puts people down at a level of you're saying you're the expert and you have nothing. And what we're saying is you have so much here. There's so many resources here. Let's look at how we could creatively assemble them to create more resilience. Next slide. And then next slide again, just showing a little bit of this process. And then we demonstrate what we mean by the next slide, the one that says demonstration of rainwater and nutrients. We do a small version of what it's like to slow spread, sink, and protect water so that they can see what we're talking about. So why would we dig interventions? Why do we want the water to go in? And so we go to a really bad piece of land like this, super compacted, the water would really flow. And we say, okay, this 1 square meter is one farm, and then right next to it is another farm. And this 1 square meter, we're gonna do interventions that slow spread, sink the water in the ground and then protect that water. And go to the next slide, please. And we do a multitude of, one rock check dams, bioswales, contour plantings, all these different things on a small scale. And then we burn on the other land, we'll burn their crop waste, which is a very common practice. And then we'll leave the ash on where they burnt, but they didn't do any rainwater harvesting. And then go to the next slide, please. And then we pour the same amount of water on each piece of land. And what we always see is that all of that burnt material just washes off the land, and there's erosion. None of the water stays, but on the farm that we did the intervention with, all the water is still there, the nutrient is still there, and everybody's like, well, which farm do you want? It's like the one that kept the water, because water is a limiting growing resource. And then they say, okay, well, let's do this. And we say, okay, let's do that. And so we start to build the tools we need, which is the next slide. And we start teaching them about A-frames and contours and why it's important for water and how water sees a contour and how it is the best ways to get water in the ground. And then we'll go to the next slide. And you'll see this one, we start to then map out gardens and pathways and surveying spots. And then let's go to the next slide even, which is the showing the first bioswale. That's the mapping one, and then the bioswale one. And then we, I'm just going to keep going down. Then we start the double digging process. But now what we're doing is we're mentoring the people we just taught this back at the compound, the staff of Danish Refugee Council, the government people. We're now facilitating them teaching it in the community. So one of the things I find is really important to remember in the permaculture movement is that this information moves most technically sound in the most technically sound way through mentoring. So the understanding of this idea of mentoring, you can't do everything from a book. You know, it's really important to get that experience and to share that. And then you can see we're putting the next slide, getting nutrient, and then the next slide we're putting it into the garden. I'm going to go through a few slides to then you'll see one with the gray water system. That's it. And it's basically we do mulch basin gray water systems. You'll see the 2 stone circles where we're doing banana circles, and then looking and teaching people how to use their wastewater. Most people just throw it on the ground and it dissipates. And then we have our garden, which is the next one. And I'm going to skip after this because we're coming up on the hour. And I'm going to skip down to hold on here. I want to skip to some of the, you know, we also moved to the scale. So I'm going to skip to slide 109. If you could skip to slide 109, where we actually show a little bit of some of the larger work around that community that we did. So the first week we're doing household gardens. The second week we're actually doing larger scale watershed level or community level work to slow spread and sink the water in the ground, reestablish forestry at the very top of the system. And here we have multiple strategies that we're doing. Yeah, there you go. That's it. And that is part of the work that we show in the community as different scales. So sometimes we'll do the household and then we'll do a farm, but this one we did a household and some watershed mitigation work. So now let's go to the next slide, and I'll just go through a few. This is the this is back at the compound now. This is several weeks later, and now the rain that used to just hit and pound and compact that land in the next slide is now starting to grow. So you can see that one slide. That's you know, you can see how it's starting to spread and grow in just a few weeks' time. So we'll go through a couple more. That one slide that's showing now with the trellis, literally those pumpkins that I think were there were those sweet potatoes that actually were spreading out and starting to take over the compound, which is a good thing. And then you can see some of the compound pictures there of the gardens, and that's the gray water system. Next slide is showing the garden starting to take root. Next slide, we're starting to see the fruits of our labor. So here's some pumpkins starting to develop. And then go through a few slides. There's a watermelon. And so that's at the compound. But then I want to get it to the slide 119, which is going back to the household that we did the initial permagarden. And so we chose this woman, Chelina, I think is her name. Is that right, Chelina? Was that her name, Natalie?
Yeah, her name is Chelina. She's from Equatoria in South Sudan. And then Martha is from Jungle Estate in Greater Upper Nile. So yeah, that's Chelina.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that clarity. So here is a picture with her gardens now starting to be very, very productive. In fact, they were so productive. This is her children here where they're actually starting to dig more gardens because she's really as provide a lot of her. Next slide, showing her kids. I don't know if you got that one. And then we'll go to the next slide, 121, which is also showing some of the sunflowers starting to come out, which is a great chicken feed. There's her kids, and then the sunflowers, the next one. And then I want to go to there, the next slide is the bioswale with trellising over it. So again, growing three-dimensionally and utilizing that nutrient and growing prolifically. And then you can see the next, which is the more mature system with a great bean, perennial bean. Somalia bean is what we've been told, perennial bean that's producing a lot of food for her on a daily basis. And then the next slide, you'll see the progression of 3 different photos. So if you look there, it's the day we planted it and built it. And then you'll see to the right is the larger, taller picture is it growing, and then it mature on the bottom left-hand picture. So you can see the progression of growth. And that was just in like, I think 3.5, 4 months. And I think I heard from you, Nat, that she was getting at one point half a kilogram a day of beans. Is that correct?
Hey Warren, I don't know if that was Chilena. I think that was Danisa in Kibondo. But I wanted to say that those beans have a nice story. I found them in Kakuma. We were trying to bring a permaculture approach to a demonstration farm that was already established by us, DRC. And it was there that some of the Somali refugees who were in Kakuma camp were growing this perennial Somali bean. And I took them home and I took them to my 5th floor farm, my balcony apartment permaculture system. And I was propagating the seeds there. And now I take them all over because they are perennial. And they're such a great source of both food and biomass. And so we've just been spreading those seeds all over the place.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. And I was excited to go back to that place where you got the seeds with you, and you showed me where you got them, and that in Kibondo there, I believe. And yeah, that's I think that's an important issue that also I kind of skipped over earlier when we look at community and watershed level is also seed security and seed saving. And I think it's important that we help to promote that as a part of this. Then I want to have you move to slide 134, and I'm going to end here in just a moment. Slide 134, if you could. And it's technical backstopping, it says. So one of the things that's happened is that we've started to do these trainings all over. Natalie's done so many different trainings around resilience and regenerative design work. And so now a lot of the work we're doing is developing the tools to be able to get more people trained. And one announcement I want to put out there is that we're really needing more experienced people in this work to develop into high-level trainers that can work within the larger NGO context, that can work within the opportunities, but also the many constraints that are there. And to train, we want to have a program. USAID is helping us to put together a high-level training to be able to bridge people to the NGO world from the permaculture movement, agroecology movement, from all these other movements that are out there, as well as to train up some people within the resilience design world to be high-level trainers, because we have so many requests. I know, Natalie, you come up against this all the time of just there's not enough people who really know their stuff out in the field and have experience working in these types of contexts. Is that true?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Warren. It is true, and it's also you know, people their comfort level, especially for people who are still kind of starting at the beginning of their journey, are comfortable with the farm, the garden, the agricultural aspect of it. But what I need is, you know, not that people can come away from this with the permagarden, because I mean, we can all do permagardens. What I need are people who have the confidence and the technical wherewithal to, you know, guide excavator operators. That's really what I'm looking for, you know. So really moving into the environmental engineering aspects, and, you know, getting out into the landscape. And the other thing is that you can do a lot of harm, you know, with when you're designing for water. And so making sure you have someone who, you know, has the confidence to kind of take bold action in the landscape, but not so confident that there's carelessness, because we can't, you know, cause flooding where there wasn't flooding and bring new problems. And so getting permaculturalists who are comfortable in our context where we're working, who can be respectful of cultures, let me just say it that way and stop there. But also who are more on the larger scale engineering side. That's for me what's really important, because what the slide that I see on the screen is the, you know, looking at the whole mountain. So looking at, you know, just really proper design that's safe and not going to cause more problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I appreciate that. Natalie and I did the infrastructure course earlier this year that I mentioned earlier in this presentation. And you know, we had a large, you know, like a D8, we had was it a D6, a excavator, a big, road grader, and, you know, a lot of equipment doing a lot of work over and all simultaneously. So we were having to train people to actually how to manage the large equipment. And I think that's a really important an important aspect of it, as well as being appropriate at a small scale as well. So and then also the part of being able to be a good technical backstop to a team that's working at different scales. And so next year we'll have more announcements around this training that we're going to be doing, and we'll be vetting it very closely to get the right people in there so that we can get more high-level people trained. And you know, I'm hoping Natalie will be a part of our teaching team or facilitation team there, as well as some other folks that have been doing it at this scale and at this level. If you could go to one last slide, which is down at my contact information, which is 78. If you could just take it to 178. And I just want to put it out there. Just you know, I'm working through USAID right now, their Scale Award, which is helping to develop more of these tools, and then working really closely with Natalie and developing some of the tools they're doing and our training formats, and really working the edges in the industry with Natalie. And so, you know, I'd love to stay in touch with you. Send me an email. I'm not on Facebook. I just am not communicating that way. But of course, Natalie is, and I know a lot of, she has a large following because of the substance that she has in her sharing. So I just want to say thank you to the István and the team there in Hungary for the work that you're doing. And I just want to you know, hopefully inspire a few of you to really, you know, look at where are you taking your skills that you're learning, and how can it be leveraged for this time where we must have more healing in the world happening on the ground with the soil and the hydrological systems. And it's been an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Ask one thing, just one thing, and like maybe it's like an inspiring sort of leave, and then you can exit, like smoke bomb and exit out the back window. Can I ask? I was wondering, because you're saying like
yes, please, yes,
for these people to come and join in and do this work. For people watching, who really want to come and join, who really want to come and do the work, what is some advice or some steps that you could give them for how they could be involved in what you're doing, or involved in creating something like what you're doing for themselves?
That's so.
Yeah,
Warren.
Natalie, do you want to do a quick download?
Well, yeah, I mean, I get asked this question a lot. And what I realized through answering it a couple times is that I was already working in my industry, and I learned about permaculture, and like everyone else, I thought I want to go build a cob house and have my homestead, and I still hope to do that one day. But in the meantime, I have to bring permaculture to, like, permaculture has to meet me where I am. And so, you know, I was already in this industry and brought it to my work. But then I think about corporations like, you know, Lush Cosmetics. They're a bunch of permaculturalists. Are they farmers or gardeners? No. But in their processes and how they think and how they design their systems to be supportive of regenerative supply chains and industries, they brought it to where they are. And so I think that if you, no matter what you're doing, no matter what your job is, if you can bring this lens of regenerative, you know, building regenerative cultures, I think that we will find many ways to have these kinds of stories of being involved in this. But otherwise, I mean, you know, I would say keep on top of world events, understand what's happening, try to be objective, and, you know, there's websites like ReliefWeb or any of the major donors like USAID, DFID, who, you know, are increasingly, you know, submitting tenders or calls for proposals to integrate these kinds of activities. And so I know the market is opening up, if I can call it that, within our industry, because we do want to find more people who can help us roll this out. So, you know, figure out who are the NGOs who are doing this kind of work, and, you know, who are involved in agriculture, for example, and then, you know, it's okay to message people on LinkedIn. It's okay to, you know, send cold emails, ask for informational interviews. So there's just a lot of ways to try to connect. And, you know, social media is an amazing way to have a low ecological footprint while we're all sheltering in place, and build our social capital. And there's just, you know, the system is it's filling in. And so all those connections are really getting closer. So yeah, just keep networking, keep your eyes open, and don't come with superiority. You know, I would just say that you're there to learn also. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll keep it short from there. Happy International Permaculture Day. And I just, you know, my very, very simple motto is everybody grow food everywhere.
Yeah.
All the people, all the places. So thanks a lot thanks to Istvan and the whole team for this format. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I also agree with Natalie and what she said. And then another way of looking at it too is, you know, there's personal development work that you can do, gaining more experience on the ground. Again, like I said earlier in the presentation, that, you know, being able to be experienced when you go into the field is essential. So where do you get that experience? So volunteering, there's, you know, Quail Springs, if you're going to work in drylands, Quail Springs has a great apprenticeship program. There's a lot of people you can learn from, and then do it so you also gain experience in the climates you want to go and work at. The other thing is, you know, I love Natalie has taken a bunch of courses from me in years. She's done a permaculture course. She's done, and with other people, she's done that. She did Earthworks course with me. She's, you know, we've done a couple of them actually, and now we teach together. And so I think that's an important way to actually do some personal development. Like I would say, do Dr. Lane Ingham's Soil Food Web Foundation course. I think it's important to be really grounded in soil biology and understanding the soil food web. I think also doing courses like we do Earthworks courses, and different people do Earthworks courses around the world. So to learn how to do larger scale earthworks, plant your own gardens, just, and then volunteer. That's the place that you start up, is volunteering, once you have skills to be able to share. And yeah, and so with that, I just, I wish you well on your journey. Feel free to email me. And I also do have an Instagram. I do have Instagram that I only share the work that I'm doing, so you can see some of the some of the things that I've posted on that. A lot of work with Natalie, but also with organizations in Congo and different parts of the world. So again, thank you everybody, and have a beautiful permaculture day.